that you had indicated, you stated to this commission that you hadn't determined any propensity for violence whatsoever.
That's correct.
That's correct? And yet, Mr. Tucker, Mr. Mahoney, and Constable Cox were left with the belief that you were investigating threats in relation to the premium.
It would appear that they perceived that, yes. Okay.
Now, they also, I think it's fair to say, perceived that this was urgent. Certainly, you went back to Ms. Ivey and said ASAP. Ralph Tucker was under the belief that it was as soon as possible ASAP. And Mr. Mahoney, in fact, I believe, said on the stand, he was left with the belief that this was urgent. You had to deal with it right away. Did you intentionally leave that impression with them?
I said ASAP, which means exactly what it means.
As soon as possible?
Yes. If I felt it was urgent or emergent, I would have used those words.
I'm sorry, I do have a little problem hearing you.
If I felt it was urgent or emergent, I would have perhaps used that specific language.
Well, the language you did use left them with the impression that there was a degree of urgency to it.
Okay.
Would you agree with that?
I could have, yes.
Okay. So, this is Easter weekend. You contact them on a Saturday. You determine on the Sunday that you're going to go out to Mitchell's Brook, correct?
Yes.
Okay. You don't phone first. You go alone. You don't take another person with you. And it appears everyone that was left in your trail, and I mean by that the people you had contact with, were clearly of the belief, that was my mistake, I'm sorry, were clearly of the belief that this was something that had to be done right away.
Yes.
What was the urgency of going out there, Officer Smyth?
Well, I never classified it as urgent. My request for information was as soon as possible. I would classify the duty I was carrying out as something that should be done as soon as practicable, but not urgent.
Well, you certainly left the impression with them, and added to that, it is a Sunday, it is a long weekend, and in fact, when you arrive there, it's Easter Sunday dinner hour when you go to the man's house, unannounced. And this is over something that's not a threat. Correct?
Correct.
Okay. So, to anybody viewing this, it would appear that you certainly had a degree of urgency. And I'm asking you, why would you leave that impression when there was no urgency whatsoever? It wasn't a threat.
If my request for information left somebody with the impression that it was urgent, I'm not sure if I can particularly help that. My request for information is as soon as possible. And I do absolutely want that information as soon as possible. Once I'm seized with that type of information, we begin our follow-up. It is inherent and incumbent on us, to follow up on that as soon as practicable. Now, I'm working, that's my regular shift, Easter Sunday, the holiday or particular religious connotations associated to it. I can't be impacted by that. I have to carry out my duties, my roles, regardless of that.
The greatest respect, Officer. You spoke on your direct testimony about the things you did with your children or your child that day on Easter Sunday before you came back to town, the things that you had to do. It's only normal to believe that the average Newfoundland family will be doing something along the same. You have left professional people, all who are articulate, capable, educated people, with the impression that this had a significant degree of urgency, and yet you're simply saying to us, no, it really didn't have any degree of urgency. I was just gathering information, and this was my normal work day, so I went out there.
As soon as practicable.
We have no threat, correct?
Correct.
We have no imminent concern in relation to any harm being done by Mr. Dunphy, correct?
Well, that's part of the reason for going out there.
correct?
In doing that as soon as practicable.
Officer Smyth, on the information you had nothing to ground any concern that there was anything imminent with respect to actions by Mr. Dunphy.
No, sir.
You did not, correct?
No, I did not.
But you chose to go unannounced to a person's home on Easter Sunday dinner hour. You don't think that that in itself is perhaps inappropriate action?
No, I do. Absolutely do not.
You would not think it inappropriate if someone was to come to your home when you're having family dinner on an Easter Sunday with your children and your wife and perhaps some friends and interrupt you unannounced completely to ask you questions about something you've said. You don't think that that's unreasonable, inappropriate? Because that's what you're saying, I understand.
Are we reversing the roles exactly? Have I said the exact same things Mr. Dunphy has said and then...
Oh, no. Officer Smyth.
I don't understand your question, sorry.
Well, with great respect, I think you do understand my question. If you had said, if you had made any comments and someone called you to ask you comments that are not criminal, comments that, quite arguably, are not even inappropriate when you're espousing your political views, to comes to your house on a Sunday, Easter, dinner time, when you're probably having dinner with your family, children, and friends, would you not, to come and question you unannounced about that, you would not think that's inappropriate?
Was there have I made all the previous commentary as well?
Officer Smyth, he made no wrong comments. Mr. Dunphy had every right, just as I do, as you do, as anyone in this room does, to make the comments he made. You had no basis to scold, scorn, or confront him with that.
I did nothing of the sort. I nor scolded him, scorned him.
You did confront him with it on Easter Sunday at dinner hour at his home, unannounced.
I spoke to him about it.
You went to his home unannounced on Easter Sunday dinner hour. Did you not, Officer Smyth?
Yes, I did, but there was no confrontation.
Okay. And what was it all over, Officer Smyth? What was all of this over?
What was all what over, sorry?
This was over exhibit number 0009. And I'm reading it back to front in the order that it was meant to be. And I'm sure if you reviewed it as you said you had done, you would have assessed it in that manner as well. Would you not have, Constable Smyth?
Sorry, what is it we're looking at right now? What are we looking at?
We're looking at the train of...
It's not brought up yet, so look for exhibit 009, 0009.
3 zeros and a 9, Mr. Commissioner. And I'm reading back to front on this, so I take it in the sequential order that they would have been received. It starts off, Sandy Collins says, traveled with the Premier of Newfoundland in his car today. Guess what CD was playing? Sherman Downey, The Sun is in Your Eyes. Mr. Dunphy replies, is that why you can't see problems of seniors and injured workers? The sun is in your eyes? Put on your sunglasses and take out the earplugs. You might see and hear people crying for help. But why? Would you care about putting in hard time getting the poor man's MHA pension? I hope there is a God. I think I see him work on 2 garbage MHAs who laughed at poor people. He got them before they got to enjoy the pension. They didn't deserve it. I won't mention names this time. 2 prick-dead MHAs might have good family members I may hurt. Now you, please explain to me how anyone could take from that it is a threat, a dangerous statement, a concerning statement, an inappropriate statement, one that is in any ways illegal or subject to state intervention. Can you please explain that to me, Councillor Dunphy?
I've never classified it as a threat. I do absolutely believe it's disconcerting and strong language when you direct that towards an individual, an elected official whom you don't know.
Did you use the word threat just then, when you threatened something?
I said I did not use the word threat.
And then after that, what did you say?
I said I would absolutely classify it as a disconcerting comment, one that would cause concern, for sure.
It's a disconcerting comment that shows a level of frustration with an institution. That is our right in Canadian society, isn't it? To voice those concerns?
Yes.
Am I going to be subject, if I voice my concerns to you or someone in your position attending at my door, unannounced, to interrupt family functions? Is that what I'm going to be subject to in a free country?
I think
No, but that's what you did.
if your commentary is directed towards public officials and has a number of other potentially concerning commentary built within it, then yeah, you would.
Where's the other
subject to
concerning commentary built within this?
I'm talking about the entirety of his social media feed.
He has a right to voice his opinions.
Yes,
None
he
of
does.
his opinions. Workers' Comp looked at it. Tom Mahoney looked at it. He said, no, there's nothing we can do. There's nothing inappropriate about it. We don't like it. Just like any elected official doesn't like to be scolded, brought onto open line, or have their conduct reviewed. What gives you the right to go out to this person's house unannounced over something that, when they're exercising their right to free speech? What gives you that right, officer?
I was never looking to interfere with his right to free speech.
Oh, with the greatest respect, officer, that's exactly what you were doing. You wanted him to provide you with an explanation as to why he said this. And I know of no onus, unless you can point it out, why he should entertain you, listen to your questions, or even be subject to your questions.
He doesn't have to.
Unfortunately, he was.
It was his choice to open that door. I've been in situations where I've asked similar questions of people and have been told very politely where to go.
Officer Smyth, let's call a spade here. You left the impression with everybody that it was urgent. You left the impression that it had to be dealt with right away. You go out there on a long weekend in Newfoundland. You go out there on a Sunday and it's lunchtime. You don't call first. And you don't see anything inappropriate about that because the man exercised his right to free speech.
No, I don't see anything inappropriate about it.
Okay. I was going to take it to a portion of the transcript, but you've admitted it on April 6th. In one of your statements, one of the first statements you gave, you indicated that this it's Exhibit 0119. Page 3 of that exhibit, of the statement, it might actually be page 4 of the exhibit, because there's probably a banner page on it. Next page, madam. Thank you. Last paragraph down, about 50% of the way through. But it was, again, it was ambiguous. There was certainly no criminal threat by any stretch, but enough in light of his previous history and social media history, which was constant, commentary about his issues with government, in particular workers' compensation. That's his right. That's his right under Canadian society to make comments about these things, to express his views, to demonstrate, and indeed cause inconvenience to elected officials, it would appear, through demonstrations. And yet you're...
I agree wholeheartedly.
Then what basis had you to go down and interrupt this man as you did?
As I've stated here earlier on in this hearing, there's a duty and an expectation when you identify certain behaviors to follow up on those behaviors.
What behaviors?
And conduct.
Let me stop you there. What behaviors? What behaviors did you identify that fall on anywhere in your mandate which we read to you, which could be imminent or in any ways ground a potential harm to the Premier or government officials?
Persons who may be engaging on a pathway to violence, which starts with a specific grievance, unresolved grievance, that may or may not be founded in reality.
His grievance with Workers' Comp had gone on for a significant period of time. It was well documented by Workers' Comp, which you saw before you went out there. They determined through their legal counsel that there was no grounds to do anything. You had that before you left. And you knew by your own admission, it was not a threat or anything of that nature, and yet you chose to take the action, leaving everybody with the impression it was urgent, going out and doing what you did, at a time when this man could say, what are you doing here? Why wouldn't you call first? Why wouldn't... You didn't do that.
I'm sorry, is there a question there?
You didn't do any of those things.
Which things?
Call first, attempt to engage in a conversation, set up an appointment to see him, ask if he could come into St. John's to see you, tell him you'd provide the transportation.
No.
Set up a time to go out in the next few weeks or next day or so when it's not Sunday, not lunchtime. You didn't do any of those things.
There'd be specific reasoning for that.
There was nothing imminent in anything he had written that caused you to believe anything was going to happen in the next few days. If there is, please point it to me, Constable Smyth.
All right. Sorry, are we still talking about not making the phone call? Did you want me to finish talking about that, or?
Constable Smyth, is there anything there that made it imminent to you that falls under the mandate as set out that you had to deal with Mr. Dunphy as you did?
There's nothing in our mandate that set out that we must follow up on something that is imminent.
I don't think so.
That is the purpose of intelligence-led policing, is to identify behaviors and problems before they become imminent.
Okay, well, let's talk about, what was the phrase you just used? What was the phrase you just used, Mr. Smyth, Officer Smyth?
Sorry, which phrase?
Intelligent-led policing?
Yes.
Exhibit 0218, managing targeted violence. Now, I can go back over it again, but I hope it's not going to be necessary. You agree that there was nothing here that gave any indication of targeted violence by Mr. Dunphy in relation to anybody, let alone the Premier or any government officials?
Nothing anywhere where?
Nothing in the information you had, Officer Smyth, that gave any indication that there was any targeted violence by Mr. Dunphy in relation to the Premier or any government officials?
Well, there are components within his social media commentary that absolutely do fill a number of the different factors considered in this very training. Yes, there are.
There were things in his past where he expressed disconcert, disagreement, anger and frustration with government, which is his right, correct?
Sure it is, yes.
Okay. We go to page 18 of the exhibit. Protective intelligence, gathering principles, investigative skills, corroboration, and common sense. Down a little further on the bottom, protective intelligence investigations should be approached with the inquisitiveness and skepticism that are hallmarks of other investigations. So you should be skeptical. Is that? You weren't being skeptical here. You were saying these are tweets I got to deal with right away.
No, I don't agree with that. I was giving Mr. Dunphy the opportunity to provide his explanation.
Why does he owe you an opportunity? There's where I think we have this continual impasse. Why does he owe you any opportunity at all?
I never said that, sir. I never said he owed me an opportunity.
You said to provide him with the opportunity.
That's not a suggestion that he owes me one. It's affording him the opportunity to provide context and insight versus just making my own irresponsible interpretation that might not necessarily be based on anything other than what I'm seeing.
To the other parts of your manual, it says exactly what you could have done as opposed to confronting him. Corroboration. The second component of protective intelligence work is corroboration. Significant facts of a case, including the statements of an individual may pose a threat, should be corroborated whenever possible. You spoke to workers' comp. They didn't consider it a threat. You spoke to the RCMP. They said they had no files that were considered a threat. You did the checks of your own police system. Nothing there revealed a threat. Correct?
Yeah, this is a very broad description of the fundamentals of protective intelligence work, that cooperation is vital in that process, in so much that information within and of itself doesn't necessarily constitute intelligence. you have to take information, apply it through a process. It needs to be collated, verified, and corroborated. This is what that's referring to.
We've heard all the information you had that day, and none of it produced any indices of a threat, imminent threat, nothing of that nature, correct?
Correct.
The last one is common sense. Protective intelligence investigations by their nature involve considerable discretion and judgment on the part of the investigator. So it's up to you to try and corroborate, to make sure you do a full investigation, and make sure you utilize your common sense, which I would arguably put forward would be, this is probably not a good time to go down and interrupt someone without being announced, to show up on their doorstep on Easter Sunday lunch hour. Would that be an inappropriate consideration?
I don't agree with that. I understand what you're saying, but
Okay, you don't agree with it, that's fine. If we go to page 88 of that manual, circumstances and context. Message intent. Previous inappropriate communications. Well, what do we know about Don Dunphy? We know his intent was to try and resolve his issues with workers' comp. It had been ongoing for a long period of time. A long period of time.
you bring up a really valid point. When you're talking about the intent, there's another reason for affording the opportunity to somebody in this situation, the opportunity to speak about it, is to determine their intent. Such a comment as the ones we refer to would arguably have little to do with a grievance resolution. So could the intent be to harass or cause fear in the persons that he's referenced in that message? I don't know the answer to that. And of course, that's part of the reason is the one to speak to.
Smyth, isn't one of the backbones of history that history is usually indicative of the future? When they study military history, they look at how battles have taken place in the past to utilize that as a strategy in the future. So you could look at, using the same kind of rule of thumb, you could look at Mr. Dunphy's past, his statements, his involvements with workers' comp, and get a read from that, just as the next, on page 90, says previous inappropriate comments. Subjects who have communicated in the past but have not taken any steps to cause harm are normally at low risk. Past behavior is the best indicator of future behavior. Subjects who habitually threaten do not normally escalate to violence. Well, he never habitually threatened anybody. He never threatened anybody, period.
Right. The point of that comment is just that we can't rely or wait for somebody to stand idly by, or we shouldn't stand idly by until somebody makes an overt or criminal threat, because an examination of past behavior, historical behavior, is indeed, as you suggested, the best indicator for future behavior, and the significant portion of persons who have carried out acts of targeted violence have indeed not specifically threatened their targets.
I'm not, with the greatest respect, I believe you understand what I'm saying here. I'm saying to you very clearly that you had no foundation, period. You had checked out all of these things, police, RCMP, workers' comp. You had no foundation from any of that there was any escalation of any kind of violence here. In fact, there was no kind of violence, no kind of threat. You left the impression that it was urgent and had to be dealt with right away, and his course of conduct and commentary had been something that had been going on for a long period of time, saying the very same things. So there was no imminent need for you to take the steps and go down there that day at a very inconvenient time, which is what you did.
Yes, I believe you're wrong. I understand the interpretation you're applying to it, but it's not correct.
Well, I'm going to take it to the next one on page 95 and see if this is correct. Threat management strategies. The management strategies are divided into two categories: confrontational and non-confrontational. They start with the least intrusive and escalate to the most invasive. Why would you utilize the most invasive at a man's home on a holiday, on a Sunday, at a lunch hour. Why would you do that when you could have exercised many other strategies and been equally as prepared? Why would you do that? What was the necessity that it be done in the way it was?
Sir, which strategies are you referring to?
Pardon me, page 95 of page 95 of the exhibit, page 92 of the document, and it's a blurb or diagram 80. It states, the management strategies are divided into two categories, confrontational and non-confrontational. They start with the least intrusive and escalate to the most invasive.
So
You took the most invasive. You went directly to his house to confront the man without being announced. Did you not?
I went there to have a conversation with him. I didn't go there to have this confrontation that
You went there. Let me take you back to the statement. The worst thing about these situations is these guys, you know, tend to be in their house. They tend to feel the freedom to say what they like, and they don't realize there are consequences for their statements. That's Exhibit 081. That's what you said.
This is what I said.
That's what you said. That's what you said to Tom Mahoney.
Right.
So you were going down to confront him because this was one of these situations where he, in his anonymity at his home, had said something that you felt had consequences.
Well, again, back to that conversation with Tom Mahoney, I think the statement you just referenced was Tom Mahoney's words, or saying they're my words?
He's saying they're your words.
Right. That was a broader part of our conversation around situations like these.
The greatest respect, and it doesn't matter what I accept, it's what the commissioner accepts. You spoke to him about a very narrow situation that day. You spoke to him about Don Dunphy. You asked if they had any information on him, and then you made this comment that these guys, being he one of these guys, that would have consequences from what he said. And I'm still at a loss as to what the consequences are in a free country.
Well, the potential consequences to situations like those could be those that are subject to criminal investigations or criminal threats. But again,
There's no
that was
threat
a
here.
broad-based
There was no threat here. You told us that.
I know.
So you're going to do this to everybody on the internet. Do you get every tweet by everybody and see if they said anything nasty about government, and do you make calls on them? I put it to you that that's ridiculous. Of course you don't, and it couldn't be done.
You're correct.
So you had nothing here to give any propensity that he was going to move on, correct? What
Sorry?
does your strategy say?
Sorry, can you repeat your question?
I said you had nothing here to prove that there was any more greater risk or propensity that he was going to do anything. And I'm now going to ask and take you.
Well,
Go ahead.
I'll answer your question, which I already have, but I'll answer it again. There was a number of elements and components within his social media commentary that do indeed lend to somebody that is following that pathway to violence. Yes is the answer.
I put to you, Officer Smyth, that Workers' Comp had reviewed this thoroughly. He told you that their determination was there was nothing there that was actionable. You had not received anything recently that was actionable, correct?
From workers' compensation?
From Donna Ivey, Workers' Compensation, Ralph Tucker, or Tom Mahoney.
No, those items were actionable.
You received nothing from Adrian Cox that was actionable.
Actionable from Adrian Cox in what way?
Criminal investigation, something of that nature.
No.
If you go to page 97 of the exhibit, non-confrontational strategies. No threat identified. Initial report erroneous or overly exaggerated. So we have, for sure, by your own admission, no threat identified. Correct?
No criminal threat, but
No,
what
no,
this
no,
is-
no, no, no. No threat. Please, if there is a threat, take me to where the threat is to.
That's what the process is. The process is to try and determine if there is a threat.
No,
Not specific to those comments. I realize there was no threats in those. What they're referring to here is that there has been a threat assessment conducted, and at the determination, the end of that threat assessment, they determined that there was no threat. If I had have had the opportunity to complete a threat assessment with Mr. Dunphy, I may very well have arrived at that very same conclusion.
Officer Smyth, this is under the non-confrontational strategies, which would mean this is under the strategies of not going down and confronting him. And it says no threat identified. So what you had was no threat identified under the category of not going to confront him. And it's possible that the reports are overly exaggerated or, in this case, misread. Correct?
I didn't misread them.
Is this not one of the things that's dictated by your manual? That if there's no threat...
No, sir. You're taking one piece of a long training manual and applying it to...
But I'm going to take you to some more of it. Page 99. Watch and wait. Open files and monitor situation. Not an intervention strategy. Monitor subjects without their knowledge. Approach may be passive or active. Why wouldn't you have utilized that strategy?
I didn't feel it fell into that criteria. I have done that, utilized that strategy for sure on many occasions.
But why did you use it here?
Because Mr. Dunphy's situation to me dictated speaking to him personally.
What in Mr. Dunphy's situation dictated that you had to go speak to him personally at the time, date you did?
A long history of making inappropriate communications to public officials, many of which were not founded in reality.
Those are, by your definition, inappropriate. By our standard of free speech, they are not inappropriate. People make statements like that continuously, and I don't understand them to be subject to criminal review or investigation by the police force.
It wasn't a criminal investigation.
You go to page 101. You go to page 101. Watch and wait. When to use. If unsure or if further information is required. Wasn't this clearly a case where further information, at the best scenario, where further information is required? The last part of information you got was from Dick and Debbie, which was over 10 years old. That was the most current information you had in reality.
Well, the most current information I had would have been from his postings and from workers' compensation.
Your investigation, those were up, easy to see, from your investigation, going behind the scenes, looking at things, speaking to his next-door neighbors, who was his brother and sister-in-law. The information they provided was over 10 years old.
Parts of it were, yes.
You go to page 104. Subject interviews. Now this is what you have maintained, that you went down to, after hearing everything, to assist, determine if there was some possible solution to his grievances. Is that not what you've said?
To try and determine if he felt there was a reasonable resolution to his grievance.
Well, why didn't you determine from Mr. Mahoney exactly the specifics of his grievances before you went down? You didn't determine that.
No, I didn't.
Why didn't you do that? Because that's one of the things, again, set out in your manual. If you're going to go for the interview, then get as much information as you can.
I think depending on what Mr. Dunphy had to say, I could very easily go back to Mr. Mahoney in an effort to glean that information for sure, to corroborate.
Officer Smyth, you go to page 105. I put to you that you fall within the category you set out there, disadvantage of interview for information gathering. Interviewer may not be fully prepared. You had not done a thorough investigation of any type in relation to him. You had not tried to get anything current, for instance, by going and speaking to his daughter.
I didn't know his daughter existed up until that point.
You did after you spoke to Dick and Debbie.
Yes, I did.
You could have utilized that, gone and had a conversation with her, received current information about that before you barged in.
I didn't barge in.
You went to his house unannounced. I would, with the greatest respect, I would call that barging in.
I didn't barge in.
Okay, Officer Smyth. You go to his house. No one is home. Correct?
That's correct.
And the first thing that meets your eye is the, I'll put it to you, probably the sign. That was there?
Yes.
Warning. And this is exhibit 0065. Warning, this is a workers' compensation poverty house since 1984. So since 1984, he's been making these complaints. It's now 2015, about 30 years, 29 years. Enter at own risk. Political people not welcome unless you're going to fix workers' comp. Is that what it said? Am I
Yes.
reading it correctly?
Close, yes.
Okay. So that clearly tells you you're not welcome there.
I'm not a political person.
You work for the Protective Services Unit of the Premier staff, correct?
I work with the Protective Services Unit of the Royal Newfoundland Constabulary.
Or the Premier staff, correct?
That is our mandate, yes.